Hey guys, it's been way too long since I've posted a video. I've been super busy working on different projects like this roll cage right here. But now it's time to get back to the 2JZ E36. If you didn't see the last video, I got the 2JZ mostly put together. There's still a couple things left. I was waiting on parts. I have those now, but we'll get to that when that time comes. The engine is in the car. We got fitment figured out. So next, what I want to do is work on the radiator and intercooler and all the piping and everything. But to do that, I want to make sure that the engine is in its exact final placement before I start working on intercooler piping. So I need to install the transmission mount. And I was originally going to build my own transmission mount, but the way the E36 chassis is designed, one side of the mount is higher than the other. And it was just going to be a really big pain to try to do it out of round tubing. So I started looking and realized that Excessive Manufacturing, which is the same company that did my engine mounts, they make a transmission mount for like $100, which you can't beat that price. For the time it would take you to build your own, it's just way better value to just go ahead and buy their mount. So here's that mount right here. Super simple design, as you can see. Like I said, you can see here that one side is higher than the other, hence this bend right here. This mount works for the stock engine and transmission. So you can use this mount, say you don't like the factory aluminum mount or brakes, you can use this for that. And it also allows you to use it on any engine swap that moves the transmission up to 1 inch back. So it should work just fine for our application. Comes with new hardware, should bolt right up. So let's go ahead and stick that on. Okay, so I didn't record that because I thought it was going to take like 5 seconds, but I got the trans mount on and it just barely fits. I thought I was going to have all kinds of room to adjust it, but I had to push the engine forward as far as it could go. The oil pan is almost touching the subframe. Just to get these to bolt up. So as you can see, maybe it uses the back 2 holes. So the stock trans mount uses this front one and the middle one, but this one uses the back 2. Bolts onto the transmission like so with these are my Condor Speed Shop poly mounts. So yep. So yeah, the excessive mount worked, but just barely. So keep that in mind if you're doing the JZ swap, or if you're doing some other swap that has a adapter plate for the trans that might be slightly thicker than what this one was, that mount might not work. So keep that in mind, but worked for me, got it on, so now we can start on the radiator and intercooler. So in order to do that, I need to get some of the front end assembled, and I think I'm going to start building the bash bar because I want to mount the radiator and intercooler to the bash bar. That way it can all be removed as one piece. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a really quick rundown on how I build a bash bar. So obviously I don't expect you to have a tube bender because they're way too expensive for what they are. But this will be a pretty simple bash bar, shouldn't take too long to make. Really, it's just going to be one main piece. I like simple bash bars. I don't like the super complex 2-bar crazy ones that just get in the way of everything. I want one main bar and I want a jack point. That's the biggest thing. Trying to get your jack clear under the car to the subframe to jack it up from there is so annoying when you're at the track. I want a jack point right up at the front of the car that's easy to find, so we're going to get to building this bash bar. You need a few simple materials, obviously Sharpie, measuring tape, some masking tape, and then I have a cheater bar, which is just a pre-bent bar that's the same diameter as what you're going to be using, with marks on it for the start of your bends. I'm going to be using 1.5" 095 DOM roll cage tubing for the bash bar because that's what I have laying around. So first things first, we need to measure our center point and mark that on here, because we always, with something like this, we always want to start in the middle and work our way out, and then we can just any bends that we do on one side, we're going to replicate on the other. So just because I don't want to actually mark directly on the bumper, I'm going to use masking tape and stick it kind of somewhere in the middle. And then I'm going to find 2 points that are identical on both sides, which I'm going to use the body lines here to get a rough idea. It's just a bash bar. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. We're going to build tolerances into it, so there's a little bit of room for error. Okay, so we have our center line marked. Now it's time for the cheater bar. So the cheater bar, it's not going to be super accurate for something like this, but it'll kind of give us an idea. Basically, I'm going to set it in here, I'm going to slide it until it starts to hit, so I know where it needs to start to curve. And actually, if I look at the bumper here, I think I want it to start to curve right in here somewhere. So let me grab a piece of tape first. Stick this in here. This tape doesn't stick very good. Now with my cheater bar, I'll start my curve somewhere about there. Now I can take, and on that tape, mark where the line is on my cheater bar. Now we're just going to take a measurement from our center line to the line where that bend starts, and that'll give us our first line and where we need to start the first bend. And now for the second bend. I do want to retain the factory bumper supports because I think they work really well. They line it up and they support the sides of the bumper, so it's not sagging. You don't have to zip tie it up all the time. So I do need to stop the bash bar right about here so that it doesn't interfere with that. So I'll just have to keep that in mind when I'm making it, but we'll put our third piece of tape here. Get an idea of where the bend's gonna start, which will be probably right about there. So now we'll take our measurements. So from here to here. Now, like I said, I want to have a tolerance. I don't want the bash bar to come all the way to the outside and be touching on the bumper. I want a little bit of space in there. So I'll subtract maybe a 1/4 inch from each side from just one of these measurements, and that'll shrink the whole thing about a 1/2 inch total, give us plenty of space. And next I need to determine the angles of the bends. So with something like this, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it because it's not going to be exact and it's not going to be touching the bumper. It just needs to kind of have the general shape of it. But without actually rolling the tubing, you're never going to get the perfect shape. So the bumper actually curves in the front, but this whole front section is going to be a straight piece. So we need to just kind of eyeball what we think a good bend would be. Okay. We'll go with a 10-degree bend on the first one. We can always add more bend if we need to. but you can't really unbend a tube. And this one, okay, we got all our measurements. Now we need to get an idea of the total length, so we know how long of a tube to cut. Always leave yourself plenty of extra. And now we can start cutting. Okay, I got my tube marked, making sure to notate which side of the mark the bend needs to be on. So now we can go ahead and start bending. After you've done the first bend, you need to make sure every bend after that, the tube is level. That way, your tube doesn't end up all crooked and cockeyed. You want it to be perfectly flat throughout all the bends. So to do that, you can use an angle finder. And then you just want to make sure that every part of the tube is level, as well as your bender die itself in both directions. And then the most important part is the part that has already been bent. You can twist the tube in the die to level it out. Tighten her down, give her one last check. Okay, moment of truth. See how she fits. Definitely not quite right. So, as you can see, it does not quite follow the bumper line right here. So, not a big deal. This is why we underbent it. What I need to do is add another 5 degrees-ish to this bend, which will kick it down. We'll kick this in, and hopefully it'll fit then. Okay, we got her fitting now. Slightly overbent it, but that's all right. It fits in there just fine. I would have liked to have gotten it into this corner a little further. What I could have done was started this bend a little later and then had it be sharper, but it fits inside of there and it'll do its job, and nobody's going to see it with the bumper on anyway. So I've got the line marked where it needs to be cut off on both sides to make clearance for where the stock support bracket goes. So cut those off, and then we'll be done with this bar. We'll just need to start mocking up the bars to attach it to the car. Okay, so I've just been going ham on this bash bar. I don't really think you guys want to sit here and watch a 20-minute video of me building a bash bar, so I kind of just skipped most of it. So yeah, it's pretty much done now. As you can see, we got the bumper on. Peep that bash bar in there if you can see it. Ugh, one-handed. There we go. So I'm actually super pumped on how this bash bar is coming out. It might not be the prettiest thing in the world, but my goal is to have a bumper on the car 99% of the time anyways, so you're not gonna see it. But what's awesome about it is the functionality. It's just been working out so well, like retaining the factory guides for the side. It just happened that the bash bar lined up with them almost perfectly, so I could just weld a plate directly to the bash bar and then mount the support to it, and it fits amazing with very little effort. I basically threw it up there, tacked it on, and it was just all lining up perfect. Like, didn't get any better. The other thing is I'll be able to reuse these factory clips, I guess you'd call them. If you guys aren't familiar with E36s, they have these clips where they have the center pin, and that center pin, when you push it in, it spreads the clip apart and holds it in there. I like these for the factory bumper because they hold it pretty well, but not so well that, like, if you touch your bumper on anything, it's going to rip half of your bumper off. They're actually loose enough to where it will let the whole bumper fall off, like if you drag it backwards or anything. But that being said, the only time I've ever lost my bumper with the factory setup was backing out of the trailer and dragging it on the deck of the trailer. Otherwise, when you're drifting it, it's pretty much never fallen off. Even crashing it, I don't think it's ever fallen off. But a lot of people, when they do bash bars, they'll just like zip tie the bumper to it, or have it zip tied to the bash bar, and then you see them have those like little hair tie things on the corners to hold it up. And I don't think those look that great. Plus the zip ties, like if you were to rip your bumper off, what it's going to do is that zip tie is going to rip through the bumper, and you're no longer going to be able to use those holes to mount it because the zip tie just ripped right through it. So I like the fact that I'll be able to use these clips. I'll just be able to stick them right in the bash bar here. I am going to weld a little piece of plate here, and I'm going to have 4 of these across the front of the bumper, but I'm going to weld a little plate here to make it a flat surface for these to mount to. But yeah, so we've got our jack point. I think it looks pretty good. Overall, I'm super happy with it. So now that I have it all tacked up, I'm going to finish all the welding on it. Once I've done that, then we can move on to mounting the intercooler and radiator. So I got the radiator and intercooler all mounted up. Just using some very basic brackets. As you can see, I've got some from the bash bar to the intercooler, and then the radiator just mounts up here on both sides. And we got some mounts below. I did have to cut the fill neck off the radiator so that I could sit it underneath the the core support that I made here, and that leaves me just enough room for a good size electric fan in here. But now that I have these mocked up, specifically the intercooler, I can start working on the intercooler piping. So that's what we'll do next. Alright guys, so it's been a few months since that last clip you just saw. I went on vacation and then all the holidays hit and I got a puppy. Say hi, Piper. Piper. So needless to say, I've been super busy and I haven't had a lot of time to work on the car, but I did get a lot of stuff done off camera. A bunch of the boring stuff that you guys probably didn't want to see anyways, like finishing the intake manifold. We got intercooler piping done. And we have the downpipe mocked up with the wastegate tube. So a lot of the really time-consuming fab projects are done now, or at least the worst part of that project is done. So now I can really start to make some progress on this thing. Next up, I'm going to be finishing up oil lines, fuel lines, and then start wiring it. So you guys will see that in the next video. But before that, let me explain to you this intake manifold and everything that I've done with it. As you guys have seen already, this is like the $100 special intake manifold that you can find on Amazon or eBay. Lots of people ask about this thing in forums and everywhere else. It basically, you know, it was just the intake manifold. It did not come with a throttle body, did not come with a fuel rail, injectors, anything like that. It also did not have a spot for the idle air control valve. Didn't have any vacuum ports. So basically it was just a bare bones raw intake that needed to be welded onto the lower runners for a boosted application because I didn't trust the gasket. So let me just tell you guys right off the bat, don't waste your money on this thing. Really, it looks like a great deal. It's $100, but it took so much time, so much energy, so much thought, so much research just to make this thing work, when I could have bought a intake that came with a throttle body, with a fuel rail for like $600 some. I think I saw one for around $500. I'd have to dig to find it again, but the GE is becoming more and more popular due to the prices of the GTE. So I expect the intake manifolds for this thing will just drop and drop in price. But basically, you know, I spent $100 on the throttle body to go with it. And then I had to weld AN bungs onto the stock fuel rail, which, you know, is a challenge in itself, when I could have just got a intake with a fuel rail that already had AN fittings. And overall, it would have made my life so much easier. So, like I said, don't waste your money on this thing. It looks like a great deal off the bat, but unless you're going to weld this thing yourself, it's going to cost you $200 at least to have a welder do everything that you need done to this thing. By the time you get the throttle body and everything else, you're going to be in it like $500. So you would have been better off just buying one that was bolt-on, ready to go, and it would have fit better, because that's the other thing. This thing didn't fit worth a crap with the factory brake system. And I wanted to do a booster delete, which helped because that brought the master back further. But it still wasn't enough. I still had to cut a bunch out of the intake right here just to clear it, and I'm barely clearing it now, as you can see. This is the Chase Bays. This is their brake booster delete plate with a Willwood master cylinder. Because at the time that I ordered this stuff, Chase Bays only had a single output master for their brake booster delete kit, which the Formula Drift rulebook does not allow. You have to have a dual output master cylinder. But now Chase Bays has come out with a new master cylinder that is dual output, and I think is much lower profile than this Willwood one, so that would be a much better bet. But honestly, just buying a intake manifold that fit way better would be beneficial to begin with. The other thing you can see is it just barely clears the shock tower over here, so another thing to keep in mind. So let me explain what all I had to do to this thing. Obviously, like I said, I modified the fuel rail, so I have my two AN fittings. I've got an in and an out on it now. Because we are doing a return fuel system. We don't want returnless for this setup. And then I actually ended up, you can see here with my intercooler piping, I had to do a pretty sharp bend because of how far this thing sticks out. And I actually even cut it. I cut the old I cut the old throttle body mounting plate off of the intake because it was set up for like a Q60 intake or something. And I bought this generic eBay 90 mil throttle body, and it came with an aluminum plate. So I just cut off the old one and welded this on a little further back, which gave me some extra room, but still not ideal. So in the future, when I have the budget, I'm definitely going to be getting rid of this thing. It should work for now. Maybe a couple years I can get out of it, but it's just not ideal. I'm not super happy with it. It could be way better. So yeah, I cut off the throttle body, welded that plate on. I already said that I cut this, clearanced it for the brake master. And you can't see right now, I welded 2 vacuum barb fittings here. So now I have 2 different sources. And if I need more, you can just tee them. So I figured just 2 would be enough. If I need more than 2, I'll tee them. But at least I have one I can use for a boost gauge, and the other one can go to the wastegate and whatever else I need. And then the other thing was welding on the flange over here for the idle air control valve. That idle air control valve flange you can get on Drift Motion's website, and I do have a parts list in the description down below. I know you guys have been asking for that, so if you want to see all the parts and where to get them, check out that list down below. And then the other thing is injectors. I went ahead and threw those in. These are Oside Tiger 440cc injectors that are meant for a 2JZ GE NAT swap using a JDM ECU, which is what I'm going to be doing. So it's the 440s, just like the JDM ECU, and for the 2JZ GE. And those will also be in the parts list down below, but they're only a few $100, and they're on eBay. But the Oside Tiger, I've had people recommend them to me, and they seem pretty legit. They came with a little pigtail that you can plug in to test all the injectors. Came with some nice instructions on what you should do the first time you install them and everything like that. So I'm pretty impressed with them. I think they'll be just fine for the stock ECU application. But I'm gonna end this video here. I don't want to ramble on for too long. You guys have seen everything I've done. You're all up to date, so stay tuned for the next video. We're going to really dive into wiring and plumbing, oil and fuel lines and everything else, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get our first startup. So we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. See you next time.